after, we'd had our argument, I felt downer than I ever have at that point in time. So then I thought, fuck it. I wanted to make an attempt to not be in here anymore, not to deal with this shit. In the middle of, I guess, doing so, I received a godsend in a way. I mean, my phone rang. I sort of just glanced and I was like thinking maybe something's going on at home. I was like, yeah, okay. So I answered it and she asked if I was all right.
That's Brandon. He's a FIFO worker who's big on mental health. Brandon's been to a dark place himself. When he was only 19, he was on the verge of suicide when a phone call from his mum saved his life. He's taken on the pressure of becoming a young dad, all while having to navigate a relationship that wasn't working. Brandon's been dragged through the family court system trying to stay close to his boy, and if that wasn't hard enough, he also lost his best mate to suicide. He's an ambassador for Mineset, a not-for-profit supporting mental health in mining, and he's made it his mission to look after his mates. Welcome to Young Blood, an award-winning podcast on a mission to make the mental health of young men a top priority. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is our platform to open up and share stories of what we've been through because we're not alone. Let's do it. Before we kick this off, I just want to say thanks so much to everyone who's taken 15 to 90 seconds out of their day to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It boosts us up the ranks massively and makes a huge difference to how many people we can reach with these potentially life-saving stories. So thank you. And for those who haven't got around to it, please, if Young Blood has delivered you some value, let us know on there. Cheers, legends. Trigger warning, if you find anything spoken about in today's episode distressing, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. Brandon, what was it like for you starting out in FIFO?
To begin with, I love the lifestyle. I loved earning big money. A lot of people I worked with were great. I come from farming into mining, so it was a bit of a big change. And then, I loved it, but I realised I loved that lifestyle more being away than being at home. But it was also my biggest downfall in that because, I had a partner at the time. And it made that hard. We were both, I was 19, so it was very, very young. And I sort of deterred away a bit. And then it more or less broke down.
So you were spending a lot of time away and that meant you weren't spending time with her. How were you feeling as a 19-year-old when you were out on the work site? Were you very conscious of the fact that was falling apart, or was it something that came as a shock to you?
I was definitely conscious of it. I guess I enjoyed living the high life and a bit of a playboy lifestyle at the time. I had money to burn, so even my breaks wasn't spent meaningfully. It was, I went out on the piss. I went out and caught up with the same blokes that I just done 14 days with.
That's a pretty common story though, isn't it? Where you give a lot of young blokes a whole bunch of money, and then when you do get some time off, of course, you're going to piss it up the wall because you don't know any better. So it's sort of just that time in your life, you'd be hard pressed to be disciplined and know, I suppose, the complications that can bring as well. Odds on you're going to do the wrong thing to start off with until you work it out for yourself. But in having that relationship break down, considering you were partying, you were having a good time, one might think that it wouldn't really upset you that much that you were then cut loose and single, but I believe it did really hit you pretty hard.
Yeah, it did. It really did. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes there. And it was, I guess, regret in a way.
Did you feel guilty about it? Or what was it that you were holding on to that was upsetting you?
Just that bond. I mean, I came from a small town and moved to the city with my partner at the time. And, then it was finding a new place to live. It was finding a lot of that. And it was just, I'd lost something that, I'd tried a lot of experiences, around being in a city, just living that lifestyle. Yeah, it was a bond that had broke.
So you sort of like lost that safe place, and then you were in still a largely unfamiliar environment. So you were kind of thrown into a disarray, you could say, where you didn't really know you're up from you're down, you sort of lost balance, and someone that you were able to rely on before then wasn't there. So that asks a few questions of yourself. How did that then affect your work?
In quite a big way. My mind wasn't with it. So a lot of things, I was fucking up. A lot of things that were simple enough, I just couldn't fathom.
Just like couldn't concentrate?
With that, I fell into a really dark spot. I never thought I'd be in ever. I was always happy, always a worker. But when something started affecting my work that I couldn't sort of control, that was my first instance where I realised, I'm like, fuck, what's going on here? But then I just turn a piss.
So what did that darkness look like for you?
It looked like I was in a place alone that I wasn't achieving. Yeah, I'd put on a face when I was around people. I'd put on my life's great. My life's perfect. But in the end, it was a battle with myself. It come to a head one night where it affected my job that much that I actually got stood down just for something dumb. It was something silly at that point, something that I messed up. The employer at the time stood me down before the bar had shut. So I did what I usually do, went to the bar. I drank because they have a record of how many drinks you have. I bought 27 or 28 beers that night.
For yourself?
I'm sure I handed a couple out, but most of them to myself, yeah.
Okay, so probably cause to cut you off 15 beers ago, you would have thought?
Well, you would have thought so. I just didn't really give a fuck attitude.
So all those beers, what state did that put you in?
Drunk and miserable. I'd got into an argument with then my ex-partner. It threw me in a bit of a loop. After, we'd had our argument, I felt downer than I ever have at that point in time. So then I thought, fuck it, I'm going to end it all. I wanted to make an attempt to not be in here anymore, not to deal with this shit. In the middle of, I guess, doing so, I received a godsend in a way. I mean, my phone rang. I sort of just glanced and I was like thinking maybe something's going on at home. I was like, yeah, okay. So I answered it and she asked if I was all right. And then it just broke down. And then it was a bit of a long recovery, I guess.
So what was that conversation, mate, when she called you? Because one, the fact that she called you right at that moment when you were attempting to end your life, and I believe she called because she had a feeling that she needed to talk to you, that maybe you weren't okay. Do you remember how that conversation went and what she said?
She had an inkling that I wasn't doing extremely well. And the conversation sort of started as like, Brennan, are you all right? And then it was, I was a sobbing mess at the time. I was, Mum, I'm fucking over it. I'm done. This is fucked. I just don't want to feel. She's like, look, we'll just get through tonight. You're on a plane, come back up home. So I did.
Did that feel like divine intervention? Is that sort of how you see it now?
It was probably one of the most single page turning experiences I've had. It was, I can't even say anymore. It was a godsend. It was something that I guess, yeah, divine intervention would be the word.
Because is it safe to say that if she hadn't have called at that moment that you wouldn't be here anymore?
Yeah, most definitely.
Good motherly instincts then.
Yeah, definitely.
So then after you had that chat thankfully, you didn't go through with the suicide attempt, and then you moved back home. How did things start to improve from there? What work did you have to do to be able to see things differently and improve your health?
I grew up on a coastal town on the WA coast. So I was at the beach every day, just looking for, a little bit of an answer. Or I'd go walking along the beach just to try and, I don't know, find myself again. I picked up a little bit of part-time work back at the farm I used to work at. Being in that environment, being back home, it meant the world. It was a reset that I desperately needed.
So you'd had this relationship breakdown, and that was really tough for you. I understand that. Was there a deeper question within yourself that was a big part of what you were struggling with, like an unanswerable at the time in terms of not knowing who you are and what you wanted out of life, and a confusion there? Like, how do you articulate what it was that you were struggling with other than just the end of a relationship?
I was struggling to figure out who I was at that point in time, because that was a stranger. And then I semi-realised that I was more or less running away from something I couldn't run away from. When it came from me, I'd never dealt with emotion. I'd never dealt with feeling. It all opened up in a big way. And during that period of time, I just thought I was a totally different person. It was me just tucked away. I was brought up to always be hardworking, always, put everything behind me unless it's something major and huge. But I didn't realise that all the little problems can create the fucking biggest problem you'll face.
Yeah, letting it all build up over time. And that was the first time where you'd been, it sounds like, pushing stuff down for your entire life until it just runneth over and the volcano erupted and couldn't hold it anymore. And then you're living with a lot of confusion as to why you were feeling that way, and you never had in the past, and that's not how you dealt with things. So pretty discombobulating to not know what the hell's going on. How did you end up getting yourself to a better place where you weren't at risk anymore and you were feeling better about yourself?
Talking about how I felt. I mean, I never expressed emotion a lot of the time.
Who'd you talk to?
I talked to my mum a lot of the time about it. I didn't sort of reach it. And that was my first instance speaking to a EAP program, that even though the site that I just got sacked from, they still, gave me their chaplain's number if I ever needed it. And a lot of time, and in that instance, talking about things and the way I felt kind of lifted the load a bit. Lifted the load to, I guess, a manageable place.
And then fast forward to 2019 and you became a dad for the first time, which is a pretty massive deal. But not only that, you were doing it trying to navigate a relationship that wasn't working for you. Talk a bit about all that.
In 2019, yes, I became a dad, and it's the best job I've ever had. I'll say that here and now. But a relationship doesn't work just because, a child's brought into it. So I realised I was in a situation that wasn't an environment that I'd want for my child growing up in. And I decided to call it quits. Then fast forward to October. We split up early on in the pregnancy. And then, my beautiful baby boy was born. Trying to navigate co-parenting during all of this, all that is extremely hard. It got to the point where even mediation we couldn't reach an agreement. We went down the family court route. At the end of mediation, there was a time frame of about 4 months. I didn't get to see my child, and that fucking broke me. That was pain that I'd never felt before. It was a new level of pain. I wasn't focused, even at work. Like, I thought, the last time it won't be as bad this time. Because at this point, I'd gone back away. I couldn't focus, couldn't do anything. I knew that I couldn't keep up a lot of the time. Something seriously had to change.
Because there's a lot of dads out there that will relate to you on this, Brandon, ending up in that situation where they have split from their partner. They are going through the family court. They're trying to get shared custody or make sure that they can see their child and then have that taken away. How were you able to cope with that? Because it seems like it would be so frustrating to have something so important that's beyond your control and be the sort of thing that's all you can think about all day, but you're pretty restricted in what you can do to actually change things. So how were you able to cope with that?
I was able to cope with that. I mean, it made me an angry person. It made me upset. It made me just not me. I actually joined a MMA program as well as everything. So training and health played a big part in me trying to sort through my issues.
Was that you trying to take it out on some poor bugger at sparring though? Or
No, it was more try and teach myself discipline.
Yep.
And then I delved into looking at different avenues, and that's when Mineset reached out to me, because by that point I'd started making a couple of TikToks, obviously being in the mining sector, and they more or less reached out and sent me a message, be like, would it be something that you would be interested in?
And Mineset's a not-for-profit that promotes mental health in the mining sector.
Yes, it is. Even then, I was given ways to manage, I guess, manage the stresses in my life, because the family court system was that drained and just, it ruined me.
Yeah. So it seems like you're in a position where you felt like you had to get stronger, and often training and looking after our body and our physical health, that is something that we can largely control, at least if we don't have any illnesses or whatever it may be. So being able to look after all of that stuff, that's something that you could control, you could make sure of, and that's going to give you the best chance at being able to function mentally and have the energy and have the endorphins and the positive vibes to at least keep yourself going and not fall in a heap.
Yeah, exactly. There's a unimaginable amount you can put into your body, but your mind and body are two different things. Well, in my opinion anyway. I started meditating, which was more or less what's going on around me versus what's going on in my head, because I needed a break from all of this noise that was going on. And I sought out counselling and therapy sessions.
So you were being very proactive about trying to look after yourself, I suppose, because you'd known by that point what it was like to go in that hole, and you didn't want to end up back there and then not able to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this being me experiencing more pain than I did before, it probably would have swallowed me whole. I sought out a counsellor, and I had, with each session, things just started getting put into perspective. I felt more confident. I'd go into mediation appointments and I'd feel like about this big. I was nervous. I was scared. Like if I say the wrong thing, it's going to fuck up a major part of me. So I sought out different avenues, and counselling, was great. And it was actually recommended to me by a friend that I didn't know that was in counselling at that point. And he's like, yeah, man, check this out. They're great. So I did, and I was a bit skeptical. I was like, I'll talk to people, but I don't want to open up too much. I sat down in the chair and it just flowed. It just flowed out of me like nothing I'd experienced, because I don't know whether it was comfort or, I mean, psychologically wanting to make that change, but it just flowed out of me, stuff that I'd never spoken to anyone about.
So the training and the counselling and the meditation, what did all that do to your anger and your attitude and your mindset?
It worked wonders. So I felt more confident. I felt like, okay, I've got an issue here. I'm going to fix it. I could walk up to a machine and I could fix that, no worries. Now I need to take the necessary steps and put all of this together to get to a point where I'm comfortable and confident. It gave me my confidence back, and it got me to a point that I felt like I could do anything if I put my mind to it. And I had to strengthen myself because I was anxious, I was nervous, I was depressed. It all went away with enough time that I put into myself, striving to achieve something. I'd plan little goals then. I'd give myself a week to achieve in the ways of thoughts, or whether it be training or whichever. It just gave me the ability to be all that I can be, because it's not only me anymore. I got a little boy. It took me from thinking time for myself was selfish, things like that, to it's like, okay, you've got an issue, let's fix it. And then a lot of people started to see the change in me even before I seen it. And they're like, oh, you're not moping around, things like that. I'm like, well, I didn't think I was to begin with, but it must have shown more than I'd realised.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we show that internal state more than we think we do, and that we might think we're doing a fantastic job of hiding everything, but even though people might not know exactly the depths of what we're feeling or the reasons for it, you certainly give off certain vibes that you're struggling and that things aren't quite right, and it can be very frustrating for people not being able to get that out of you or feel like they can do much to help you. And it just about always comes back to people like yourself having to make a conscious decision of, what I'm doing is not working. I'm banging my head against the wall, and I've got to take some different actions here and take responsibility and pull myself up out of this, or I'm going to end up sinking. And you obviously did that. How do you explain what it's like to have your son in your life?
It is the best feeling in the world. I mean, I could have any job I'd wish. Being a dad would top it all. You understand what love's all about until you had kids. I mean, I thought I had a good idea about what love is until I had my son. That was a feeling that I still to this day can't appreciate enough. Like I said just before, it's not just you anymore.
Yeah, and you wanting to be your best self is that, and previously thinking that was selfish, that becomes completely necessary in order for you to be the man and the dad that you need to be there for them. And then you've got a much bigger reason rather than just yourself, and depending on your own view of yourself, that might not be enough of a reason. But when you have your son there as well, and you're like, well, I don't want to be this miserable bloke for him and be this guy. I want to be the guy that he's going to look up to and be proud of. And I imagine that would be a pretty big motivator.
It was a massive motivator for me, because it becomes a teachable moment. I wanted to be the person that is seen as a sign of strength. Like, I'm sure most dads would want their kids to look up and be like, oh, Dad's strong, Dad's everything else. And I guess I want him to feel as though he can come to me with absolutely anything in this world, any problem he has, then be like, it's okay. Like, if you come to me crying, it's okay, Dad cries too.
That's what you need more of. And you've obviously become that man, which you should be proud to be. Now, you've been through plenty by this stage already, talking about when you were 19 and then having your son and the relationship breakdown. But that wasn't the end of it. Even at the young age that you're at now, you also lost your best mate, which is a shocking amount of difficult stuff to go through. Tell us about that too.
I remember that extremely vividly. I was in Rebel Sport of all places. I was just taking up squash. So I was in buying squash balls. A mate that I went to school with called me. And so I picked up. He's like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, oh, just Rebel Sport. What's going on? He's like, oh, so you haven't heard yet. And when those words come out of someone's mouth, you know it's not going to be great. I was like, oh, wow, what's going on? But Keanu's committed suicide. At first I was shocked. I said, what the fuck? I was like, you're not fucking joking here. And then I just went silent. I mean, I was like, I just, like, my hat went flying off my head. I just sat on where you try shoes on, sat there with my hands in my head, my hands, and just, it was unbelievable. So a big backstory. I was always a bigger dude in school and things like that. I didn't really have a lot of friends. I was picked on a lot until I went to a boarding school. And the first person I met was this person in particular. And, you know, we were in the same dorm. We did everything. So for that 3 years of my last year of school, we lived together. And I myself don't have any siblings, but I found a brother in him. And he was always amazing at everything he wanted to achieve. He was a great musician. He was great with his hands. He was very inventive. I was in his room when we made like a couple of different things, like a fairy floss maker out of a deodorant can and a little electric motor. Like it was one person that was going to go very far in life, and I always strived to be like that person. I always wanted to be like him, just good at everything he did. You know.
Did you have any idea he was struggling?
Not to that extent. I mean, he'd asked me, you know, a couple of questions because I got into sort of the mental health type scene around that point. He asked me, you know, a couple of things, but I didn't really think much of it.
Yeah. Well, you don't, do you? Like, unless that has actually happened to you before and you've lost someone to suicide, you never expect that your mates or people you know are struggling that badly. I mean, I had the exact same thing with my mate where I knew he wasn't in the best place, but I was completely shocked that it was to that extent. I think men typically, we're good at hiding just how bad things can get, and unless you know what signs to look for and you're willing to sort of push the envelope a bit more or really ask another follow-up question, it can often go under the radar and until it's too late, tragically, like that for you. So what was it like processing that grief, and what was your experience of grieving that loss?
My experience of grieving that, I was asking myself why for a lot of times. Like, you know, we'd just spoken 6 days before. We were planning a fishing trip for when I, you know, was home from work. We'd just take off and go away for a couple of days, just a couple of rods in the water, just hanging out. So I was like, how did we come from there to what's happened? I guess I was confused a lot uh, regarding that. And I mean, I rang his parents and I just didn't know what the fuck to say. I mean, for one, I mean, I lost my best mate, but I'd had to realise they'd lost their son. And me being a father now, me being a dad, I couldn't think of anything fucking worse.
As time's gone by, mate, how have you come to think of it? And I suppose, like, where are you at with that now in how you remember him?
I'll tell you what, there's still not a day that goes by where I don't think about him in some way, shape or form. You know, something amazing will happen one day. I'll just think, oh, fuck, and try and get him on the blower. But no one's going to answer. You know, I've got photos, you know, that I've in frames that I just walk past and look at. I'll spend like a moment just looking, and I've tried to strive to do a couple like things in his honour, you know, I did mullets for mental health last year. And a big kicker behind that, because it was only 2 weeks, about 2 weeks after he had passed, I had signed up for mullets for mental health. It was something that I could maybe do in his honour. I mean, it's not going to go extremely, but I don't want someone else to go through the pain that I was going through at that point. I mean, I wouldn't wish a lot. I mean, I'd lost my brother.
Yeah.
I'd lost my brother without the feeling of having a sibling.
Well, sorry, man. You know, it's the worst feeling in the world. You know, and we don't know what it's like, thankfully, to be the parent, but you can sympathise with that. But I know how you feel losing a close mate like that, and the void that leaves in your life, and just the repeated shock of it, even months and years after it happened, still being shocked that they're still gone, they're not going to come back, is one of the hardest things that I think human beings ever have to swallow. And all you can really do is carry their memory on and try to remember them how they'd want to be remembered, and speak about them how they'd want to be spoken about, I suppose, which you do a very honourable job of doing. All this pain that you've been through in your life and these difficulties, what has that taught you?
Sometimes look at the loudest laugh in the room, because they could be facing demons that you don't know about. It's more or less be more subjected to what people in my life are going through, or anyone around me, or just anyone who feels the need to have a talk. I guess a lot of the time, for the person that made me today, it made me resilient enough to look for slight changes in myself, close friends, family. Even the slightest little inkling, like it did with me, the slightest little thing that you will chuck into a compartment in the back of your head, you're just adding to, I guess, a fuse of a bomb that may go off at any time. You just maybe adding a little bit, or shortening the length of the fuse just a little bit. It goes off in ways that until you have, you know, until you experience these things firsthand, you'd think, oh, I'll be all right. It shocks you. That's why I guess the person I'm now wants to look towards helping people talk about their issues and raising awareness where I can. You know, every site I go to, I hand out, you know, pamphlets, information, little booklets, stickers, like Mineset stickers. And they'll be like, because it just starts a conversation. A lot of the time I'll hand it to a couple of people, and they'll be like, oh, what's this? And then I say, And I give them a rundown, it's a not-for-profit mental health organisation. I was like, are you all right? Anything you want to talk about? Something that should be said a lot more of the time, rather than one day a year where people ask, are you okay?
Yeah, that's right. We know that one day doesn't cut it, and you're the perfect man for the job, mate. You're the man who needs to be out there touching those groups and talking to those blokes, because they're going to listen to you, because you are one of them and you're brave enough to step up like that, and it means enough to you to go out and have those conversations, as uncomfortable as they might be. And for that reason and many others, it's so great that you're still here with us and you didn't make that terrible wrong decision those years ago when your mum called you. And now I've got no doubt that you'll go on to be an amazing father for your son, and he'll be very lucky to have you, as are all of us in Australia. So just want to commend you on doing that work, and not only for Mineset, but doing that inner work and on your physical health and stepping up and doing everything you needed to do to be the most effective version of yourself, rather than fall into despair, which you would have had plenty of excuses to do so, mate. So you should pat yourself on the back, but I know you probably won't.
No, thank you very much. It's always amazing to hear. But thank you.
Thanks for coming on and sharing that story for the first time as well, because I know it's your first podcast and it's real tough to talk about those things and then revisit it and open that up again. So thanks so much for doing that, mate. Appreciate you.
No worries. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to our local business supporters, Herd Financial and First National Real Estate. Making these podcasts isn't cheap and we can't do it alone. If you'd like to become a supporter, please send an email to callum@youngbloodmedia.com.au. If you're getting some value out of the show, please give us a quick rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps us out. You can watch every episode in studio quality video on Spotify and our YouTube channel, Youngblood Men's Mental Health. We go by the same name on Instagram and Facebook, and follow Youngblood Mental Health on TikTok. Subscribe to our e-news through our website, youngbloodmedia.com.au, and most importantly, share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.